Ghosts are everywhere. Sometimes they take the form of a stranger, sometimes the form of someone you might know. They might just appear for no reason at all and terrorize us mortals for a while and then disappear. But most commonly, ghosts have a reason for their appearance. And sometimes you may not even realize you are dealing with a ghost until it is too late. Moonlight Drive with a Ghost. In the 1890s, there lived a farmhand on a farm in the county of Janakkala in the district of Häme. His name was Arttu, and he was an upright, honest, and hard-working young man. His employer was a farmer called Janne, who appreciated Arttu as a worker. Janne had even promised that he might give a certain remote piece of his farm for Arttu as a lease. This meant that Arttu would be a sharecropper for Janne at some point, if he kept up his good work. So all in all, things looked quite good for Arttu and life was easy and simple. But then, one spring, things got complicated. The 18-year-old daughter of the farm, Helena, caught his eye for the first time. He noticed that she had grown into a beautiful young woman, and he fell in love. However, she was the daughter of an independent farm owner, whereas Arttu was just a farmhand and a son of a sharecropper. So Arttu tried to keep quiet and control himself, because he knew that he had little hope in his romantic dreams. But nature took its course, and Helena also noticed the handsome young farmhand. At night, Arttu came to her window and knocked on it. Quite soon they were walking hand in hand in the night, listening to the birds singing songs of spring. They decided to marry and even dreamed of midsummer wedding, which would be quite soon. But first, they would need the permission of the father, Janne. Some time passed, and then, with a beating heart, he nervously approached the farmer and said, "I love your daughter, and I want to marry her. With your permission, we will have a church wedding this midsummer." Janne's mouth gaped open in astonishment, and then his face turned red. He said, "What? What is the meaning of this? How dare you? You're nothing but a farmhand, and my daughter cannot marry you. We come from a long line of wealthy stock. My daughter must marry a farmer's son with a solid properties and good land. You have nothing." "But what about the farmland you have promised me?" Janne shouted. "My daughter will not live on a miserable sharecropper farm with cockroaches and dirt. And I take my promise back because you have done dirty work behind my back, trying to seduce my innocent daughter." Arttu tried to control himself, but could not. He replied, "I may not have land or property, but I have a good name, and I am a hard worker. I will take your daughter away whether you like it or not." With a cruel smile, Janne said, That will be a day. How will you take anyone away? You don't even have a horse. These words hit Arttu painfully hard because they were true. A man without a horse was truly a nobody. And here he was, speaking grand words about taking Helena away. He blushed with shame and anger, and gritting his teeth, he said, "Someday I will have a horse, and I will come back for your daughter. I will go to America and make a fortune there. They say that all get rich in America. Then I will come back, and you will be sorry." Janne laughed out loud. "That's nonsense. They say that only to get fools like you to travel to America and break their backs in the iron mines of Michigan. Many go there, but only few get rich or come back at all." Arttu started to turn away, but before he did, he said in a quiet voice, "I swear on my soul that I will return. No matter what happens, I will return." Next day, Arttu had packed his few belongings and was ready to say his goodbyes to Helena. They stood under a birch tree and hugged tightly. Birds were singing out their songs of summer joy, and nature was in full bloom around them, but their hearts were gripped in ice-cold sorrow of separation. Arttu gripped Helena's hand and said, "I promise that I will come back no matter what happens to me. I will come back with a beautiful horse and drive you away from here," Helena cried. "And I will wait for you until you come back and knock on my window." Arttu smiled. "Very well. I will come and knock 3 times. Then you know it is me, and you can open the window." With these words, Arttu left. He took a train to Turku, and there he paid all the money he had for a ticket to America. He boarded the ship, and as the ship sailed away, he watched the coast of Finland getting farther away from him with a hollow and empty feeling inside. Meanwhile, life went on back on the farm. The midsummer came and all the young people were excitedly talking about the great gathering for the midsummer night dance. Helena said that she would not go to the dance. This made her mother angry, and she said, "You will go to the dance, you young fool. That Arttu of yours is now all the way in America and he won't be back. He has probably forgotten you already. It is time for you to get yourself a proper fiancé. You know, a rich and handsome man. There is no sense in pining after some penniless farmhand." So Helena went to the dance, but she did not dance. She just sat away from the others and watched the dancing couples mournfully. Summer turned into autumn, but there was not a word or letter from Arttu. Helena did not lose her hope because she knew that letters could take even a year arriving from America. Winter came and snow covered the land, and then it was Christmas. At Christmas time, it was customary for young people to go sleigh riding on Boxing Day. Various sons of local farmers came driving their sleds with tinkling sleigh bells and drove to the yard of Helena's home. They called out, "Come driving with us, Helena. It is warm in the sled under the covers and the ride is fast. Helena opened the door a little bit and called back. No, I won't. I am waiting for Arttu, for he has promised to take me away. The young men rolled their eyes scornfully and laughed. Then they drove away their horses to look for other girls who would accept their offer. The Boxing Day turned into a night and darkness settled on the snowy plains. Festivities were now over and everybody turned to their homes. The night after the Boxing Day was believed to be a night of demons and evil spirits. So all the doors and windows were locked carefully. Helena went into her chamber and sat on her bed. Little by little, the whole house became quiet, except for the mice scurrying away with their tiny feet in the walls. Helena combed slowly her long dark hair, and for the first time she wondered if she would have to wait for Arttu her whole life. After blowing out the candle, she laid down on her bed and pulled the covers over her. Sleep came over her immediately and wiped away the worries. There were 3 knocks in the night. Their sound awoke her from her slumber. She sat upright right away, and her first thought was that she was dreaming. But then there were 3 more knocks on the window pane. It was true. Arttu had come back. With a pounding heart, she rushed to the window and drew aside the curtains. The moonlight was so bright on the snow that she almost had to shield her eyes. Just outside the window there stood a dark figure. Behind the figure there was the shape of a big horse and sled. Some distant voice in her head whispered something about evil spirits that walked in this very night. But she ignored it and opened the window. Happily, she said, Arttu, you have returned. Come inside. The figure didn't reply. The horse behind the silent figure made a rumbling sound, and now Helena could see it more clearly. It was the most handsome horse she had ever seen, with a heavy black hair and shining harness. The eyes of the horse had angry red glow in them. The figure in front of her spoke in a rasping, painful sound. I have come back to take you for a drive, just like I promised. The horse hit the front hooves to the ground and shook its head impatiently. Helena began to see the face in front of her. It was Arttu's face, but something was different. The face was dead white, and eyes were empty and gleaming like 2 old coins. The room to Helena's chamber opened and her father stepped in slowly. He paused and asked, Who is it? Then her father saw the figure behind the window and he gasped. Helena, close the window now. Don't step outside or you are doomed. It is not Arttu. But her father's words seemed to have an opposite effect on her. Helena scoffed and climbed over the windowsill. Of course it was Arttu. He was just looking tired from a long trip. But he was back now, just like he said he would be. And once again her father was trying to stop them. The figure, who looked like Arttu, gave her his hand, and Helena took it. The wave of coldness hit Helena like a hammer, and she felt like she had fallen into ice water. The coldness made her numb, but she didn't want to take her hand away. The thing that had been Arttu smiled for the first time, and its sharp teeth were glowing in the moonlight. And it said, "Good girl. You belong to me now." The creature led her to the sled by hand. Somehow Helena knew that this was her last chance to turn back. But a strange delight filled her mind, and she felt dizzy. She grabbed the railing of the sled and turned back to look at her home for the last time. She saw her father in the window and saw that his mouth opened and closed as he shouted something. Yet she could not hear a word, as if there was an invisible barrier between them. Helena sat down on the sled and drew a heavy blanket over her lap. The horse neighed in triumph. All of a sudden, the ghost was sitting beside her, and the horse rose to its hind legs, neighing like a thunderstorm. The sled started to move like lightning, and the familiar landscape began to speed around them. The ghost held the reins and glanced at her and asked, "Moon is shining bright. The sled is traveling light. Aren't you afraid, girl?" What a strange question, Helena thought, but replied in a similar manner. "We're traveling far and wide. My loved one at my side. Why should I be afraid?" They traveled faster and faster. The landscape sped by so fast that she did not recognize them anymore. Helena saw a red, dim glow far away in the horizon. The ghost looked at the red glow, shook the reins, and said, "See the fires of hell, where we are going to burn. That is the reason for my return. Aren't you afraid, girl?" As if through a hazy dream, Helena saw now what was going to happen and started to cry. But her old love for Arttu still kept her from giving up, and she said to the ghost, "Moon is shining bright. My loved one at my side. Why should I be afraid?" The ghost let out a ghastly laugh and said, "Your loved one straight girl. In panic, Helena looked around and saw that they were now traveling far above the ground. The winter forest was far down below them. Suddenly, she remembered an old piece of advice on what to say in a situation like this. She started to recite, "Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come." At once, the horse started screaming in a horrible voice, and the sled shook in the air. The ghost began to wail and moan as it tore out large chunks of its hair in pain. The face of the ghost melted in sick yellow ooze, and worms crawled out of the ears and eyes. The ghost turned to her and with rotting tongue hissed these hate-filled words. "I will go to hell to burn, but one day I will return. That is the promise I keep. And never again will you sleep." Although the sled was still high up above the treetops and a frozen lake, Helena climbed over the railing and jumped into the empty space. The last thing that she saw was the snowy frozen lake that came to meet her as she fell. She was found the following day on the frozen lake. Her father and mother gasped in horror when they saw her walking around like a dead person. Her dark long hair had turned white, and in her eyes was an empty stare of madness. The news came from America that Arttu had died in a mining accident in the deep, dark mines of Michigan. Helena's father tried to tell her about the news, but she was beyond any words now. For the remainder of her life, she sat in her chamber, staring out the window into the distance. She never slept again, just sat still and motionless. There was no peace or rest for her father and mother either, because they knew what she was waiting for. They knew that one night Arttu's ghost would come back. One night there would be an ice-cold hand knocking on Helena's window. 3 times.